In this video, we're going to answer a key question. Can we expect Bitcoin's price to keep rising in the short and medium term? And what about altcoins like Ethereum? After its major drop, is there a chance it can continue recovering? Let's dive in. We'll kick off the analysis with the SP 500 chart, the leading American index, because as you probably know, there's a strong correlation between the stock market and Bitcoin and crypto in general. What we've been observing on the SP 500 is that after a bearish distribution phase, price gave us an impulse with its corresponding pullback. And now we're seeing a clear breakout to the upside of a structure that definitely encourages a bullish outlook on equities. That said, what stands out is that price has currently hit the creek level of the distribution. In other words, smart money could be pulling the classic move, testing the origin of the breakout before continuing the previous upward trend. Now, if that happens, and I emphasize if, I don't believe that test will last very long, and of course, we can't be certain it will happen at all. But the takeaway I want you to have at the start of this video is this. Overall, we're positive on equities. We're bullish on the SP 500, the NASDAQ, and so on. The only thing we're flagging is that we're at a typical spot where a minor correction could appear. It could be small, it could be moderate, it could even be large. That's the triple scenario we might be facing. And there's even a fourth one. Price just keeps pushing up. But if you look closely, the general sentiment behind everything I'm telling you is strongly bullish, and honestly, that's all that really matters right now. Still, we obviously need to talk about how deep that potential correction could go and what levels would make the most sense for it to occur. So let's move into a lower time frame on the SP 500. At the time of recording this video, the US stock market hasn't opened yet, so we can't see how the price is trading in real time. But if we switch over to a CFD market where the market remains active, we can already see a slight breakout of a wedge forming on the SP 500. That's something we might see replicated as a gap down at the market open for the SP 500 future. But as you can see, the breakout so far isn't anything too dramatic. We're just staying on alert because honestly, that wedge could just keep breaking upward. And since our overall bias is bullish, we're prioritizing that direction. Now, when would we stop prioritizing that upside? Only if we see a very strong and aggressive breakdown of the wedge. Something big. I'd even go as far as to say it would need to be something significant, maybe around the 5,815 level dollars. Now, this would definitely set off some alarms that could eventually lead to the price coming back to test that creek level. And if the market's feeling generous, that test might be enough and we could just continue climbing from there. Also, keep in mind that in the current context, fear has really been stirred up in the markets. The VIX doesn't reflect it all that much, although it does a little, but that fear has mostly been fueled by concerns around US Treasury bonds, because honestly, the macroeconomic outlook for the United States is getting uglier by the day. But from a speculative standpoint, when it comes to the US indices, this really doesn't worry us too much. That's just the reality. Global macroeconomics is one thing, but the actual impact that this data has on the stock market is something entirely different. And to be fair, that's a distinction most economists fail to make. We're seeing something very similar in the NASDAQ. After the pullback caused by all the fear surrounding the trade war, we're now witnessing how price is breaking out aggressively, like I mentioned earlier. This breakout with a gap actually gives us more reason to be optimistic about equities, and this is exactly what we're seeing in the NASDAQ. That said, we're also keeping a close eye on this rising wedge pattern, which is currently bumping up against the highest volume zone of the entire distribution phase orchestrated by the big investment funds. That's why it's so important to monitor how price reacts here. Now, if we go into a smaller time frame like the M15, we can clearly see a kind of price congestion building in this upper zone. As I was saying, it's just a moment to stay alert, but as long as we don't see a major forceful breakdown of the wedge, it's both healthier and smarter to stay optimistic. Let's move on to crypto now. We're going to take a look at the altcoins, check out XRP chart, and notice how we're placing real importance on the price level around $2.58. We believe that could be the creek of a much larger macro accumulation phase, and that's exactly why we're bullish on the long-term crypto market. It could push us to much higher levels over time. Of course, markets don't move in a straight line, so we're not expecting this to play out overnight. A lot of things can happen in between, and our job is to identify which of those scenarios actually makes sense and when it might be time to reconsider a bullish outlook. But noise, that's always going to be there. In fact, noise Noise is what drives markets. They don't move in perfect straight lines. And remember, in Crypto Insight videos like today's, we're doing both short-term and long-term analysis. Some days, I'll bring you content focused entirely on the short term, and other days, we'll dive deep into long-term setups. That's why the message in each video can be completely different. If one video is released on a Monday, another on Wednesday, and another on Friday, just to give you an example, depending on whether we're analyzing the short term or the long term, the directional message can vary entirely. I mention this because some people might watch the videos and feel a bit confused. From one video to the next, it might seem like we've completely changed direction. But really, it all depends on the nature of that specific video, whether it's focused on the short term, the long term, or both. I say this to give a bit of context, especially for those of you who are new to the channel. For example, we are clearly bullish on XRP in the long term. And right now, based on this analysis, we're identifying a strong support area where price is showing signs of defending itself. Interestingly, this same area was once a zone of distribution. Institutions were selling off XRP in this price range. We can see that because there was a sharp downward move that followed, which is now being tracked within a descending channel. If we want to stay positive in the long term, then honestly, the best thing that could happen in the short term is for price to deliver some kind of bearish climactic action, maybe even a fake out that traps traders within this structure. And in an ideal scenario, that would be followed by XRP and altcoins starting to push higher with solid upward continuation across the crypto market. That would be the perfect setup. Now, if you're wondering whether we're seeing the same thing happening in other altcoins, the answer is not exactly. In fact, the story changes completely when we look at Bitcoin, because while altcoins have been dropping in this phase of the market, Bitcoin during this very same period has been climbing. I'll explain how we can interpret this divergence in just a second. But first,
welcome to Crypto Insight, your ethical and moral channel for cryptocurrency technical analysis. Here, we really know what we're talking about. We conduct advanced technical analysis that has been developed for over 12 years. We upload videos several times a week. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, let me know and leave a comment with your opinion. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss the next opportunity.
let's continue with the altcoins. In this case, let's look at Solana. Solana has also come up to test a key structure, a one defined by past market reactions that should really grab your attention. And honestly, it's been amazing to watch how strongly Solana has rallied here. What we're seeing makes perfect sense given where we are. It would be pretty unusual for price to come all the way from that far back and just break through this level in a straight line, especially when it's a key level anchored much further in the past. So seeing this kind of reaction is totally expected. Initially, we saw a compression here, a full-on distribution phase, followed by a black swan event in the form of a sharp move down, and since then, price has been following that move with a descending channel. That said, just like I showed you with XRP, the idea of a bearish climactic action before a bullish continuation, that possibility is still on the table. But look at how Solana is warning us if the market really wants to, that climactic bearish move across crypto might not even happen. How do we know that? Because what we're seeing here is an impulse, a channel, and a range, and all of this could already be the bearish climactic action. This entire move might be the first leg up, and why not? We could get its replica right after. In that case, we wouldn't even need to see a deeper bearish move to justify an upward continuation. And look, certainty is something we'll never truly have, but what we can do is start identifying those key levels we need to monitor closely. So basically, if Solana breaks below this support zone, the most likely outcome is that price drops below $159.99, because losing that defense zone would signal we're now searching for a proper crypto-wide climactic move. Ideally, that would come in the form of a trap, something that gives us a legitimate black swan event and set Solana up to fight for new high. That's how critical this support area is for Solana, and we're even using it as a kind of proxy to track overall market sentiment. Now, what really stands out to me when looking at Binance's chart, specifically BNB, is this whole volume profile. That's what we want to focus on because we're looking at a price range that may not seem obvious at first glance. But in other cryptos, we've clearly seen it act as a distribution zone capable of pushing prices lower. We're not seeing the same kind of intensity here with BNB, but we do know that something important is happening for the broader crypto ecosystem. And take a closer look right now. Zoomed in on your screen, you'll notice this volume node really stands out on the profile. I think it's a key level. Let's mark it up and extend it to the right. Once we extend that level, notice how price has tried to break through this major volume node, but has completely failed. That's something worth paying attention to. It makes you wonder, are they signaling that the market isn't ready to move up yet? Maybe what we're going to see here is that long-awaited bearish climactic action. Now, in the case of BNB, it's honestly hard to visualize exactly how that would play out, unlike XRP or Solana, where those setups are a lot more visible. And when it comes to Chainlink, we're looking at this entire range as part of a long-term bullish accumulation process. If we analyze the volume profile across the full range, we can pinpoint a high concentration of transactional volume around the 14.9 level dollars. If we drag that level to the right using this blue rectangle, you'll see that every time price has tried to break through it, the institutions have stepped in with a firm "not here." So that could turn out to be a very strong zone for Chainlink 1, where price compresses, consolidates, and prepares for a potential move higher. And just like we've seen in other cases, this small-scale distribution pattern carries with it a supply line. Basically, as long as that supply line holds, short-term price action will likely stay bearish. But when we finally get that breakout, a true bullish black swan, it'll give us the green light to shift our outlook to positive. And when we understand the broader macro context of crypto, all of this could at the very least point to the possibility of surpassing recent highs across the cryptocurrency market. So in Chainlink, it would also make sense for the market to create a bearish trap right here, something that looks like it's breaking through high volume nodes, but could actually be a fake out. Hopefully that's the case. And from there, we could see a proper black swan move upward that really launches the price. Now look at XLMM Stellar. What we're seeing here is something very similar. We're considering that this entire movement may be part of a bullish accumulation phase. After that black swan breakout, we're now testing the origin of that move and even digging a bit deeper in search of more liquidity. Watch closely. We'll extend this rounded profile to the right, and it's exactly where price is currently reacting. What's fascinating is that we also have another rectangle around this same zone that actually starts from a later candle. What really stood out to me was that right after this brief bullish moment, we got an extremely strong candle, what we call a master candle, with massive volume and an overwhelmingly bullish delta. And if you look at the effort to reswap ratio that followed, there's absolutely no doubt. During that candle, the big investment funds, the institutions, the smart money, the all-seeing eye, the all-knowing eye, the market manipulators, the ones always positioned opposite to retail traders, the Lionel Messi of finance, they were heavily buying in there. That's why when we look at what happened next, it's no surprise at all that they're now stepping in to defend that position. And that's what's driving this rally. That's extremely positive, and it reinforces our long-term bullish bias for the crypto market. And like we've already seen in some other altcoins, it's entirely possible that we don't get a bearish climactic move before the market takes off. It might just go. Could be sooner than we think, who knows? But with Stellar, the price zone between 0.28 and $0.2745 is a very interesting control point. You can actually use that area as a useful proxy, even as a kind of border. In fact, if the market did want to go for a climactic bearish move, they could easily do a liquidity sweep here, and that's fine, no problem. That might actually mark the end of the current move, impulse, channel, range, then climactic action, and then a black swan move that pushes XLM higher, and not just XLM, but the broader crypto market as well. All right, now we're going to move on to Bitcoin, but before that, I just want to highlight all this confluence we're seeing right now in the altcoin charts, because in this ongoing bullish reaccumulation phase of SUI, if we analyze the volume profile, we're spotting a very clear confluence where price is respecting a zone that shows strong transactional interest from the institutional players. If you want I can repeat all the metaphors again, the strong hands, the smart money, the big investment funds, the major banks, the Lionel Messi of investing, whoever you want. The point is, they stepped in to defend that level. They came back and said, hey, friend, we're going long here. Don't mess with what shouldn't be messed with. We want to take this higher. That's one side of it. Then on the other hand, we have this distribution phase, a distribution that's being defended with a very clear support zone. And the moment that support zone gets broken, we could absolutely turn bullish on SUI and by extension on the crypto market as a whole. In fact, we're already considering the possibility of this descending channel being broken through a black swan event. And the real question for me is this: are we going to get a sneaky bearish climactic action before breaking out and taking off, or are we just going to go sooner than expected? That's what I've got running through my mind, and it's what I'm here to share with you. Now, for those who are long-term spot investors, nothing to worry about. We're still bullish. If you've got a long-term position, just let it ride, let the price keep climbing. And now, let's take a look at what Bitcoin is doing, because honestly, it's playing a huge role right now, and it deserves our full attention. But before we do that, let's check out an X-ray of the crypto total market cap, excluding Bitcoin. Basically, it's a macro index that summarizes everything we've been analyzing so far. And what are we seeing here? The same thing, right? We've got a black swan breakout, which is exactly why we're maintaining a bullish outlook. We also see a clear defense zone being protected. And ideally, we'd love to see another black swan here. We'll see how it plays out. Like I said, the market could very well throw in a fake out. In fact, that wouldn't be hard at all to pull off. And if it did, that would be a fantastic setup for both investing and trading. So after that climactic action, we'd wait for the black swan, and from there, head toward new highs. That's the idea. It's also worth looking at the total 3x. This is the crypto total market cap, excluding both Bitcoin and Ethereum, so everything else. It's kind of a pure altcoin index, and it helps us visualize the state of the broader crypto ecosystem. What total 3 is telling us is that we're in an institutional distribution phase, and that phase is continuing within a descending channel. That descending channel, I've carefully analyzed it, really took my time with it, has a clear target. So where's institutional target number 1? Well, following the distribution, the flat trend breakout and the creek test, what I'd really love to see is one final shakeout, ideally a proper bearish climactic move down to around $844.69 billion. Remember, since this is total market cap excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're talking in billions here. And after that climactic move, then we'd be looking for recovery. But like I said earlier, nothing's ever guaranteed. That bearish climax might never come. And this whole thing might just take off sooner than we expect. Everything is yet to be seen, but Bitcoin is going to help us understand it all a lot better. Now, before diving into Bitcoin, take a look at MicroStrategy, which honestly tends to behave very similarly to Bitcoin, but with one small and very interesting difference. So what we have here is a complex corrective pattern. There's the impulse, this is a W, then we get a weak, soft Y, and finally a Z in the form of a wedge. Now, a Z pattern isn't something you want to reverse. This is basic chart reading 101. You don't want to force a reversal from a Z. That's why we're still projecting the most catastrophic scenarios, even while staying positive on this Z structure. After all, the wedge break wasn't that dramatic, and that's actually a good thing for our medium and long-term outlook. But if the market wanted to scare people, imagine how far MicroStrategy could fall just to create a fake out. It could drop all the way down to around 376.32 cents and still be totally fine. Because again, you don't want to flip a Z. Let it finish and we'll assess it differently afterward. That's the optimistic way of interpreting this chart, especially considering we've already reached the target of the entire accumulation process. That's why we're seeing some resistance at higher levels. But like I've said before, institutional targets are made to be broken, and sometimes they go for target number 2. But first, you've got to give it a breather. A little correction. That's the translation, a pause, a cool down. Now, let's get to the main course. The part you've been waiting for, what's going on with Bitcoin? As we said, MicroStrategy is in a complex corrective wedge pattern, a Z pattern. And if you look at Bitcoin, we sort of need to cheat a bit here. But MicroStrategy gives us the justification to do it. It basically opens the door for us to interpret interpret Bitcoin in a similar way. So let's say this too is a complex corrective structure. Here's the W, here's the weak Y, and then what we've got next, yes, it's a trap. But if we let ourselves ignore that part, just like MicroStrategy lets us, we'll realize this whole thing is a textbook Z-Pack market. No doubt about it. And that's why we're so bullish on Bitcoin and the crypto market overall. Bitcoin more so than the altcoins, because as I've mentioned, in this final phase, we're seeing altcoins dropping while Bitcoin is climbing. There's a clear divergence between Bitcoin and the altcoins over the last few weeks. Now, if we zoom in and look at the most recent section of the chart, keeping in mind that we're still in a wedge, still in a Z degree, we can evaluate this as a bullish reaccumulation process. And we see that Bitcoin may have already reached its first institutional target. But just because we've hit that level doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It doesn't guarantee we'll get a correction. We might not. Honestly, looking at the momentum behind this wedge's upward move, I wouldn't be quick to assume that this target will cause the wedge to break. Could it happen? Sure. But it's smarter to stay cautious and not try to reverse a Z. That's why Bitcoin is such a valuable asset for us right now, because tracking how this wedge plays out and watching to see if there's a strong breakout at some point could reveal a potential bearish climatic move for the crypto market. Or maybe that's just too much speculation for now. We'll see how it unfolds. But if it does happen, we'll be measuring possible landing zones. And as long as those zones hold, that could be the perfect spot to resume the Z-Pack and keep the momentum going. Even if we do see a big aggressive wedge breakout, which we should eventually see, whether it happens now or much higher up, when it comes, it doesn't have to mean disaster. It's just a matter of identifying where that landing zone is. Because as long as we stay above it, there's still a great chance to continue the price impulse. Now tell me, what do you think about all this? Are you enjoying this more relaxed, in-depth style of technical analysis where we go a little deeper into the explanation? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to support the channel, give this video a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so YouTube lets you know every time we upload something new. Best of luck with your investments and trades, and see you in the next one.